Hi, I'm the Sad Panda, and this is going to be the 16th episode of my series, I Read This Should You, where basically I give you a review on a book, manga, or web novel that I've read, and you decide whether or not to read it. Of course, I only touch on the first 100 chapters or so, as to not spoil everything, but we've been through this enough times already that I'm going to shorten this intro down in the following videos. Just a little bit. It's kind of long and it's a lot to say, but it's whatever. Now, in my last video, I said that I will look for the story in my read stories list, right? And that I didn't like all that much, right? So I found it, okay? So I have two web novel accounts. I have one on my iPad and one on my phone, and I use my phone more often than not because I can carry it around with me or whatever. My iPad, I usually like to leave in my house, right? Apparently I read it on my iPad, so that's why I couldn't find it. So I was like, ugh. But here we go. This episode's going to be on The God of the Undead by That Froggy Bastard, all right? Now, this story, one of the things that I said about it was that it reads like a fan fiction. And what do I mean by that, right? Now, when I was younger, right, I read a lot of fan fiction. And I'm not saying fan fiction is bad, because I really like it, actually. I like the way people write characters, and I like seeing like different conflicts, you know. I like to see if like, what if the main good guy was a bad guy, you know, stuff like that, you know, like Naruto. What if Naruto was betrayed by the village or something? And, you know, I like that kind of stuff, right? So I read fan fiction, and when I was reading this story, I was like, oh, you know, it kind of reads like a fan fiction, you know, but I've kind of grown out of that at this point, you know. I like to read stories that are like well written and things like that, right? And so I went back and looked at it. Because, you know, it wasn't a whole lot of chapters when I first started reading it. It was like 20 or something, and I read it all, and I was like, yeah, you know, it's a fan fiction or whatever. And that's what I assumed web novel was at the time. It was just fan fiction. So I was like, oh yeah, it's a fan fiction, it's whatever. But after finding like a lot of good stories with characters like Chrysalis and Bang of the Universe and actually Cultivation Big Shot, like these stories that are really good on web novel, I'm like, okay, well, maybe it's not just like a fan fiction website, you know, because I used to go on like fanfiction.net or, you know, any of those fanfiction websites, Wattpad even, and I got a whole lot of stories that I've read on that stuff. This story, it's literally, the reason why I say it reads like a fanfiction is if you read fanfiction, tell me if this sounds familiar. The main MC is like, has a super bad life, right? It sucks, you know, everything's going wrong in their life. It's been going wrong forever, and they die unjustly. And then they go and they meet God, and God's like, oh man, your life sucked. Here, let me give you some powers. And then you come back and you either exact your revenge or you just become a powerhouse in your own right, right? That sounds exactly like a fan fiction that you've probably read if you read fan fiction, right? And that is the synopsis of this story, essentially. This guy named John Carlton, he had a bad life, right? When he was like 6, his family's house burned down. I left him with like burn marks from his like neck down. When he was like 9 or whatever, he got accused of killing a girl in an orphanage, and everyone thought he was a psycho, so he had to go to like an insane asylum, and then he was beaten there, and then he got out after eventually like convincing people that he was sane, and then he just became like a social outcast for his entire life. And then this story takes place when he's like 80, right? And he's getting home from like he's just walking home. He's got a brown paper bag, and he just buys steak or whatever. And he's super antisocial. He lives alone, and he's done with like society. So he gets home and he puts his bag down. He's like, all right, I'm gonna make this steak. And he hears some thudding or tinkering in the living room. He goes in there, and there's a woman sitting there. A woman kind of as old as he is, but you know, yeah, she's an older woman, but she's not maybe as old as him. He's like 80, she's probably like 70, right? And she has a gun, and he's like, oh, well, I don't know, you know, I only have this umbrella I can't beat a gun. And the lady is like, you probably don't remember me, but I remember you. You remember that orphanage that you killed that girl in? Well, she had a twin sister that was 6, and that's me. And he's like, oh, well, you know, I'm sorry, you know, I didn't know that. She's like, I looked through your stuff, you don't seem like a psycho to me, so tell me, why'd you kill her? And obviously he didn't, so he's like, I didn't kill her. And he tries to like go to like a lockbox to like maybe show proof or something, and she accidentally shoots him, right? And she ends up going and finding the lockbox, but she can't open it because she doesn't have a key or whatever. So she has to take it and leave. But they eventually open it and find out that what he said was true, that it wasn't him, that it was actually the orphanage like the head of the orphanage or whatever was pimping out the kids, and the girl ended up dying, and he got blamed for it. And it's a big fucked up world. But it's one of those things, And then he dies, right? And he goes sees God, and God's like, "Oh man, you are a tortured and hated soul. I'm gonna. Do you want to help me with something?" And then he's like, "Oh well, sure, whatever it is." Because he's like, he's dead. He doesn't care anymore. He's like, yeah, whatever. So he's like, all right, I need you to exterminate the human race. And he's like, what? And he's like, yeah, I need you to get rid of the human race. So he becomes the god of the undead, which is where this starts, right? And the reason it reads so much like a fan fiction is that it's really jumpy. It jumps around a lot. And if you read fan fiction, a lot of amateur writers they will not give like a reason for someone to be somewhere, or why it would jump cut, right? There's like no like pauses or anything, and there's like no reason for it. I mean, in the beginning, it kind of makes sense a little bit, because like he comes like from the sky and as like a comet, I think, and he hits the ground in like a cemetery, and he can summon the undead, and he does so, and then he has to fight like the cops or whatever, and he does so, and like he has the ability to evolve and stuff, and he does so. It's just your average fan fiction, right? And I like fan fiction, so I'm like, whatever. And as I read more and more, I was like, it's not the best story, it's not the worst story. But what really grinds my gears, what really gets me upset, is that this story, as much as it is like, all right, it's like you have to pay for it now. Like, I was reading it when it was free, and I was like, oh, whatever, it's pretty good. And then like all of a sudden, one day, the chapters that I've already read cost coins, and the chapters ahead of me cost coins, and the chapter I was reading, and like I put it down or whatever, like for the night, and I opened it back up, cost coins. And I was like, what? Like, I understand that it's like good to be like monetized, and I get that, the writer needs an incentive to write and all that, and it's just the story is just super amateur. And like, I've already read these. Like, the web novel asks you sometimes, when you haven't read a story for a long time, if you would like to synchronize your like reading. So like in Super Gene, there was a point where after like 1,100 chapters, I stopped for a while. I was like, it's a lot to read. I was gonna take some time and read it. Then I was like, well, I was reading a bunch of other stuff and I forgot. And then I ended up going back to it. It's like, would you like to synchronize your reading at chapter 1,100? And I was like, I don't really remember what's going on, so I went back and started over. But but I liked that story. That story was well written. That story was good. This story is not the same, right? It's not. I mean, I know it sounds like I'm being like rude or pretentious, or like I'm some kind of like better than thou type person, and I'm not. It's just, I don't think the story is worth coins, if you ask me. And the coins it's a lot. Like some of these like stories that I read, they cost coins. Cultivation Big Shot, right? It costs coins, and I'm caught up to it, and I've unlocked all the chapters beforehand, and it costs coins. But it's only like 7 coins, 6 coins, Some chapters are like 9 coins, 10 coins, but most of them are like 7. But from when I read this, I remember it being like 11, 12 coins, 13 coins per chapter, and the chapters are not long. They're short. They're very short. I would say that if it was in like a regular book, it'd be like 2 pages. Like, the chapters are short. It's not super long, and you can read through this whole story in like a couple hours. It's because there's only like 57 chapters in it, so it's not super long. And another thing that I don't like is that the character, right? I mean, I get it. His life was bad and it sucked, but he's like super evil just to be evil, right? And I don't like that with villains. Like, I like one of my favorite villains of all time, like Madara. I like his like mindset. I like that he has a plan, and even if it looks like he's a villain, he's actually not trying to be a villain, but he just has to be one. Like he has an ideal that other people can't see, and so he has to go through with what he has to go through to like get his point across, and that makes him a villain to everyone else. This story, if you were to read it, or if I were to tell you what this character has done you would just be like, yeah, he's just a bad guy. You know, he's just a villain. Like he creates zombies and stuff and gives them the ability to like level up and change, and he like summons like zombie dogs and like rips up people, and you know, there's a lot of scenes in here where like the MC is like he's sending like zombies through the like underdeveloped and like poor areas. You know, like there's in this town, I don't know exactly, but there's like places where like homeless people live, right? And that's in a lot of like cities and stuff. You know, there's like underpasses and stuff where like homeless people live. But he sends like these zombies down there, and it like vividly describes how like they scar like children as like they eat the parents and like then eat the children. It's messed up, and it's not that I can't read messed up stuff, right? It's not like that at all. You know, I like creepypasta and stuff. So read a lot of like when you read creepypasta, you see a lot of like gore and body disfigurement and scarring of like children and stuff. You see that in creepypasta, and so it's like it's not that. It's just like I don't know. It's a lot of stuff that you don't have to like describe, I guess. You know, and it's you know it is what it is, and I understand that. So this story, I don't think it's worth your time. If I'm gonna be honest, I don't think it's worth your time. And it's not like you can't read it or whatever, because you can find it. It's on web novel. It's in the video game category, which is another thing that I didn't know. Like it's I don't know. When you go into novels and you go to video games, this will be on it, and it's like low down on the list, which makes sense. But it has a lot of readers, like a lot of followers, like 1 million people follow this story, and I don't see it, you know. And obviously I'm not saying that I'm like the final arbiter of like what you can read and what you can't read. So obviously if you want to read it, go ahead. You know, I applaud you for wanting to read it. It's, you know, it's less than mid. It's like low tier. I would give it like a 3 out of 10. It's not that good. I dropped it. I read 41 chapters. There's 57 now, and I remember dropping it a long time ago. This thing barely gets updates, by the way. If I look, I can look at the update schedule. Yeah, maybe 1 chapter a week, but the last chapter was updated 12 days ago, right? So maybe a week, but maybe 2 weeks. And I get it, right? It takes time to write, and it takes time to think of like concepts and things, and I get that because I tried to write a book and it turned out poorly, so I scrapped that. But I just expect more from web novel stories, right? Like after my expectations has gone up from like Chrysalis and Super Gene and you know all these good stories that I've read, this one just doesn't hit the mark, and it's just not good. I don't want to sugarcoat it anymore, you know. I just don't like it. And the main character is kind of like a nothing, you know. It's just one of those characters that is evil for convenience of the plot and thinks he's super strong, and then convenience to the plot gets beat up, and it's, you know, it doesn't make sense a lot. And then there's like a confrontation between like the god like that gave him the ability to kill the human race, and then like other gods, like lesser gods, but that have given divinity to some humans, which is like the only conflict that this guy has. And even then, it's not like it's super close. Like he gets beat up pretty bad, and then he just goes and hibernates, and like because he gets passive XP from all the zombies, and then he just becomes stronger and then wins. And I don't like that kind of stuff. I don't like passive XP in a lot of things. Like I can understand it in some things like solo leveling. He has like passive XP, but he's also there, and he's also like dealing with the bosses. So it's not like it's just passive. He's like letting his like weak companions kill the weak stuff. You know what I mean? And this is the kind of the opposite, because these companions get very strong and like very fast, and it's crazy. But you know, it's whatever. This story, 3 out of 10. Give it a read if you want, or don't, you know. Also, if you like my content, leave a like, leave a comment. I always respond to them. Let me know how I'm doing. Let me know what your favorite book is. Let me tell you what your least favorite book is. this video has been pretty negative. So I want to know what your least favorite book is. And that's it. Have a good day.